Welcome back everybody to the penultimate round of the 2021 Candidates Tournament. The tournament that will decide who the challenger for the World Championship crown will be later in November. Going into the final two rounds, Jan Nepomniachtchi was half a point ahead of Anish Giri and was playing MVL with the white pieces. Let's see what happened and whether he managed or not to clinch the title and become the challenger for the 2021 World Championship match. MVL, being 2 points behind Jan Nepomniachtchi, really needed to win this game in order to even give himself a chance to catch up with the leader. Jan Nepomniachtchi, since he has the white pieces in this game, he's pretty much a clear favorite to stir the game into his favor. He starts off with the move knight to f3, knight to f6, c4, b6. Of course, Jan was kind of going for an anti-Grunfeld. So for example, if you go g6, which is MVL's main option, the Grunfeld, Jan would probably respond with the move knight to c3, and after d5, c takes d5, knight takes d5. Now there's a variety of options that white can take to stir the game into peaceful waters. And definitely Jan was very much okay with just making a draw. This would really help him get closer to clinching the title. So instead of this, MVL decides to go for b6, which is definitely not something that he usually plays, but he was just looking to destabilize the position and get a game. g3, bishop to b7, bishop to g2, g6, everything very normal up to this point. d4, bishop g7, we see this idea of a double fianchetto, very interesting idea. Black is going to try to undermine white's control in the center with his two bishops. Beautiful bishops. d5, white continues to take more space, taking advantage of the fact that black hasn't played e6 yet, so he doesn't control any single square in the center with his pawns. All of these squares are controlled by white. Knight to a6, knight to c3, knight to c5, castle. So black is going to try to go towards the control of this e4 square. Castle, finish the development, and at some point I'm just going to try to undermine your center via e6 and then c6. Try to put pressure there and say that, okay, I have some dynamic play and I will be able to compensate for the lack of space that white has. Castle, queen to c2, a6, queen to c2 wants to support the move e4, rook to d1, putting the rook on the open file, knight to e8, bishop to f4, knight to e8 sometimes is aimed at getting knight to d6 and potentially even reinforcing more the control over the e4 square. Knight to d6 was played, b3, rook to e8, Maxime, that is, decides to go for rook to e8 to support the move e6 and, as I mentioned previously, attack and undermine the pawn on d5. Bishop to e5, Jan is going for the exchange of the pieces, e6, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, rook a to b1. Now, this is one of the pros of being ahead in the tournament and being able to blackmail your opponents with making a draw. So you have the draws. It's pretty sweet at that level, especially when you have the white pieces. e5, knight to d2, f5. Finally, black is getting some control in the center, pushing for an expansion on the king side as well, a3, and white responds with his own expansion on the queen side. Is going to try to play b4 and displace the knight on c5, then potentially support even more the push with c5 and displace all of black's pieces from their ideal squares. That's the plan on paper. Black, on the other hand, is going to try to push on the king side and destabilize white on that side. Nevertheless, unfortunately, if we look at the position for black, he doesn't have any support on the king side. All of his pieces except this rook on e8, which, to be honest, doesn't have any active capabilities, at least not for the moment. All of his other pieces are on the other side, which makes it very, very difficult for black to do anything on the king side. Anything dangerous for white, at least. Queen to f6 was played. He's trying to bring more pieces on the king side. b4. Unfortunately for black, white is first, attacking and displacing black's pieces. A takes b4, a takes b4, knight to a6, e4, stop any sort of counterplay. Not only that, but also by supporting the pawn on d5 and creating this triangle in the center, this bishop right now has a very difficult time finding any sort of activity in the position. f4 was played, knight to e2, f takes g3, f takes g3. We're opening up the f file. You don't have any pieces to control the f file. I always have the rook ready to jump to f1, c5, b takes c5, knight takes c5. Unfortunately, if you take with the b pawn, I will be able to just simply play a move such as queen to c3. You will put the knight to b4, but then I will simply displace this knight with a maneuver knight to c1, knight to d3. You're not going to be able to hold on to the control of the b file with a knight on b4, and after we exchange those pieces, I will be able to invade most likely via b6. And on the other hand, you don't have any counterplay on the king side. The queen is always going to be challenged by the rook on the f file, so you're never going to checkmate me there. The position is just not very pleasant for black. So after b takes c5, MVL decides to sacrifice a pawn and take with a knight on c5. At least I'm going to have this active square for my knight for the foreseeable future. Rook takes b6 at the expense of a pawn, which is a lot. Queen to d8, rook d to b1, queen to c7, knight to c3, rook to f8, rook 6 to b2, getting ready to potentially exchange all of the pieces with the move knight to b3, bishop to a6, not allowing the knight to go to b3 because now the pawn on c4 is attacked. Knight goes to d1, controlling some very important entry squares on the f file, f2, particularly f2, and potentially also redirecting the knight to e3 from where it's going to be able to defend the pawn c4 and stabilize white's position. Rook a to b8, rook takes b8, rook takes b8, rook takes b8, queen takes b8, and Jan absolutely for sure at this point he knew that it's not going to be able to lose unless there's going to be a huge blunder later on in the game. White is just simply not going to lose this position. White is a pawn up. He has more space in the center. Of course, black has a lot of control on the dark squares, and maybe that's enough compensation for the pawn, but not much more than that. Never more than that, because now there's no more major pieces except the queens on the board, and that's not going to be enough for black to create anything. Queen to b2, queen takes b2, Jan goes for the queen trade as well, knight takes b2, knight to c8. At this point, Jan, despite the fact that he was a pawn up, he was also glancing at the other game, the game between Anish Giri and Grishuk. He was seeing what was happening there, and you guys can also check what was happening there by watching the video that I did on that game as well. But let's just put it this way. I think he was happy with what he was seeing on the other board. So he was ready to not necessarily press for too long this position. King to f2, knight to b6, bishop to f1, d6. White is still a pawn up, but it becomes quite apparent that it's not going to be easy to break through black's defense. King to e3, king to f6, bishop to e2, king to e7, knight to b1, bishop to c8, knight to c3, bishop to d7, bishop to d1, bishop to e8, bishop to c2, bishop to d7, bishop d1, bishop e8, bishop c2, and the players were very happy. Both of them. Well, maybe not. MVL was not super thrilled with this result. This result meant that he was completely out of contention of trying to become the challenger, but Jan was in fact very happy with the result, because with this draw he officially clinched the title of the 2021 candidates and became the challenger for the World Championship match that will happen in November against the one and only Magnus Carlsen. So a beautiful tournament by Jan Nepomniachtchi, very well played from start to finish, and he is deservingly so the best player in the world outside of the world champion Magnus Carlsen. We're going to see whether he's going to be able to dethrone Magnus Carlsen for the World Championship match. But for the moment, Jan Nepomniachtchi is in spectacular form, and I want to personally congratulate him for winning the 2021 Candidates Tournament and officially becoming the challenger for the World Championship crown. We will see you, Jan, in November in Dubai.